Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here at the LEV Organization. My good friend Steve, my good friend Sean, and the rest of the team that I had the privilege to meet in some home here. I think it was your home. And my good friend Eli Goldbaum, who was my classmate from way back when. I just have to give two shout-outs, one to Danny Cohen and his wife who drove me here from Brooklyn, so thank you. And the other, Sheila, who came special from Brooklyn, who used to work for me 17 years ago or more, and she came special, so I thank you for that. It's such an honor to be part of an organization that is working on focusing for having people turn pain into peace. That is my entire life. It has become my life, and I'll explain to you what I've done and why I've gotten into this arena. I wanted to start, I think it's imperatively important to start off with a disclaimer. Before I start speaking about anything, there are people in this room who have gone or going through divorces, and the last thing I want to do is to say something that someone's going to take the wrong way as if I'm judging them, which is something that I find as a community, it's something we could learn from in general. These people that are going through this don't want to be judged. No one's in their shoes. No one understands them. So we have to be careful that whatever I'm talking about is in general, we speak about divorce and what we could do better. That doesn't mean that someone who's going through it could have done it better. And that's really my point. I just was listening to Rabbi Azeri speak, and my heart is exactly where Rabbi Azeri's heart is. I wish we can come up here and say there should be no divorce. I was actually driving with the Cohens. They were talking about, I don't understand, what's the big deal? You have such an issue, just, figure out how to get along with one another. And I wish I could say that. But the reality is, most people that are healthy think like that. And most people in the world are actually healthy people, which is the good thing. I would say that whatever our divorce rate is, and let's say it's 6%, 8%, 10%, I hope it's not that high. But that means that there's 90+% of people that are happily married. And that's what our real focus is. As Rabbi Azeri said, I hope the LEV Organization goes out of business, but that's why, as Steve so nicely said, I'm working on other things as well. I have this prenuptial agreement. I work on shalom bayis. I work on divorce mediation. And I also have a marriage curriculum to make good marriages great. So I'm in business no matter what you do, because that's what we have to do. We have to keep good marriages great. So on the topic of pathways to peace and supporting those in need, I think we have to focus on, why there are so many more divorces today. What could we do? How could we agree to disagree when there is a need to figure out? And I will say the first thing I do as a mediator is always talk, is there a way to save this marriage? And sometimes, believe it or not, there is. And when I'm standing in front of you, and I know there's someone shaking their head in front of me, and that's fine, I have thankfully saved quite a bit of marriages. Those are the ones that I take, and I say those are the pride that I work on. I also thankfully have helped many people get divorced, because I understand from a very personal way the divorce realm, and the reason I got into divorce is my own daughter got divorced 12 years ago. And I said at the time, there has to be a better way to go through a divorce. And by educating people and educating communities, what I'm hoping to do is to get out this message. There's a peaceful way to go through divorce. As Rabbi Azeri said before, the concept, what it does to families, people do not understand. It is destroying families. It is destroying not only the wife or the husband, it's destroying the children, it's destroying parents, it's destroying siblings. It is destructive. And us as a community, that's what I'm focusing on. How could we as a community maybe do things differently that we don't have this destruction, we minimize this destruction? And if I'm successful in 50% of the cases, that's a huge accomplishment. I hope to be successful in 80% of the cases, 90% of the cases. We're not going to be 100% perfect. But what's so bad if we had 80%, 90%? Let's figure out as a community, how do we do this better? How do we go ahead and not kill one another? There's enough people in this world that want us killed. Why do we have to kill one another? Let's try to figure out a better way. And these are the things that we were working on, and I'm going to try to explain to you the idea of the prenuptial agreement, explain to you some of the things that I experience daily. I do not really work anymore. My partners are not going to be happy. I do not work anymore in my business. I spend just about my entire day, thanks to the LEV Organization and other organizations and people who send me cases to mediate. I do not charge for my time. This is not a money-making thing for me. On the contrary, I've spent in the tens and tens of thousands of dollars working on these type of agreements, advertising, etc. And I'm happy to do it. Thankfully, Hashem has blessed me and has given me the ability to do it. So the people that we worked with on the creating of this prenuptial agreement, the concept was everyone that worked on this agreement was a volunteer. There were Rabbanim, there were professionals, there were Tayanim, which is the attorneys that represent in a Bezdin. Sorry, I'm jumping back and forth from Sephardi and Ashkenaz. I'm sticking to Ashkenaz, sorry. Rabbi Azari speaks in my shul sometimes in Boston for Igan Sheretari. He speaks Sephardi, so we enjoy that, so hopefully you'll enjoy the other way around. So, they know all the games. They know all the tricks. And what we were trying to do is find an agreement that is halachically acceptable across the board to every single community, wherever it is, whichever rabbis you have who are going to say, this agreement is okay halachically. There is an agreement that was mentioned before by the RCA, the Bezdin of America. I'm very close to Rabbi Willig. We spoke to Rabbi Willig. I'm not here against the RCA agreement. I'm not talking halacha. I'm talking very simple. For whatever reason, I know the reasons, but that's something that it's not for tonight. Why there are communities that do not accept the RCA agreement, to make it an halachically acceptable agreement. And our focus was, and we worked with the Gedolim of America to figure out what are the intricate details of halacha to allow it to go into agreement. And we want an agreement that's acceptable across the board. And we've gotten the acceptance from every single major pasuk today in America and in Eretz Yisrael. I thank Rabbi Uzeri, actually, who brought me to a meeting with a bunch of Rabbanim. He forgot about it. I reminded him. But there was a meeting with a bunch of Rabbanim, and we presented the agreement at the meeting. And I actually became very famous. I just reminded Rabbi Uzeri about it. At that meeting, it was in Harry Ashmi's house. And Rabbi Zeri was sitting right next to me, and Harry Ashmi was sitting right next to him, and I'm sitting like sort of at the edge of the table, and there was a door right behind me. At that point, one of the first gittin that a lady got after 17 years, she had just received her get, and she walked into the meeting, and she literally walked right behind me. So I wasn't going to sit there with her talking over my head, so I stood up, and I stood to the side. So Rabbi Zeri is here, the lady is right next to me, and of course, they took videos of it, and it went viral. And I started getting all kinds of texts. Eli, you're amazing. You got this lady get after 17 years. So I got a lot of credit for it, and I appreciate it. But putting that aside, at the meeting, they told me, you have to go to Chacham Asher. He's the one you have to meet. And I sat with him that night. For the first 45 minutes, I did not get one word in. He told me everything he has a problem with prenuptial agreements. And I'm not exaggerating. 45 minutes, I did not say one word. And I said, Hashem, just put the words in my mouth. How am I going to convince him? I explained to him the agreement. I left his house at 11:15 at night on a Sunday night. He called me up the next day, Monday at 2 o'clock. And I remember the time. I remember what he said. I don't know. I'll have to translate it because he actually spoke Yiddish to me. He said to me, Eli, I sat last night. I read your agreement 5 times. I was nishtaimim from this agreement, which means I was astounded from this agreement. He said, I woke up this morning with a frischkeit, which means I woke up fresh. I want to read this agreement. I'm blown away by your agreement. And by 2 o'clock the next day, I had a glowing haskama acceptance on his part of this agreement. I'll give you the website if anyone wants it. This agreement is available free of charge, can be downloaded. It's called the Yashar Coalition. Yashar means straight, Y-A-S-H-A-R, coalition.org. Anyone wants, we'll give it to them later. It's All the information, all Askamas, the agreement, it's all online. It's here free of charge. No one's charging for it. Why not use it? So just quickly, to go through some of the points of the agreement, I have a lot to talk about. I was given a time frame, so I'm going to try to stick to getting the main points that I want to get across that could help the community. I think it's important to realize nobody gets married thinking they're getting divorced. It's fair to say everyone, as we heard before, she got up, spoke nicely about her dreams. She got married thinking she's going to have this great life. This is a simple agreement that if God forbid something goes wrong, and one of the things Rabbi Zeri said, I'm going to just say that the agreement we feel, and Rabbi David, Rahul David, who's one of the poskim that signed on, who's one of the first ones that worked with me, said to me, I believe that we are going to save marriages by using this agreement. And I'll explain to you why we feel this way. What happens is typical agreements, and this is something I want to talk about a little later in the idea of the mediation. What happens in a typical, this family issues that are going on, it's a little strife, the family, a little fighting, whatever the story is, and all of a sudden, everyone in the community, people, they start talking. It's the newest hawk of the town. Everyone's going to talk about this family. This is what's going on. Did you hear what's going on by there? Did you hear what's going on? It's terrible. Did you hear what they said? And all of a sudden, everyone's talking about it. The challenge of all these cases, initially, is to get the two people to agree to go to somebody. It's myself, Rabbi Azeri, a Bezdin, a court. Well, court we don't want to go to. We'll put that aside. We'll talk about that later. But somebody who could help deal with it in a responsible way. And the concept is, if we deal with it responsibly, there's a chance, and a much better chance, that if there's a way to deal with it in a shalom bayis way, which means to work on the marriage before everyone makes it into the newest forest fire that we have to contain, which is impossible, then there's a chance, if there is a possibility to work on the shalom bayis, like Rabbi Zeri says, I'm on fast speed dial with the Relief Organization, which helps get proper therapists for all kinds of people. If we have the ability to get into dealing with the problem of the marriage before it became that forest fire, there's a good chance that we have at least a possibility of saving the marriage. And if not, like we said before, Steve stole my line, it's shalom bayis or shalom divorce, but let's do it in peace. For the sake of these children, as mentioned so many times, I've seen the damage to children. What do children want? Think about it. What do children want? Stability, love, care. People are telling me, I deal with this day in and day out. People are coming to me, I'm doing this for the children. Baloney. You're destroying your children. People don't realize what they're doing to their kids. They're destroying. These kids have to get married. We're going to the street with all this garbage. Then later on, someone's checking into them for marriage. They're saying, did you hear about that case? Oh, yes, stay away. That, what the allegations were, who knows what. Is that what we really want as a community? So the concept that we're talking about of trying to find a unified place where both sides mutually agree to come and to deal with it, we believe is going to save marriages if it's done properly. More importantly, and I think this is an important point that I've been asked about very often, about the differences between our prenuptial agreement and the other ones. I'm not even talking about halachically acceptable prenup. I think the concept that we're talking about, that I have a challenge trying to explain to people. My agreement that we worked very hard with the Gedolim on is a very simple agreement. It is a gender-neutral agreement. Of course, we want to get gittin. That's part of a divorce process. The get is one part of the process. The entire agreement is a second part of the process. It's good to get the get, but if you don't have an agreement, that's also no good, and vice versa. So we have to work together on getting the people to a good place of a Bezdin who is a trustworthy Bezdin, who could sit and work through whatever it takes. It's negotiations, but you work through it in a healthy way. And if you could do something like that, it's not looked at as being something that, and until now, that's one of the things that I hear about the RCA agreement. People feel that it's an anti-men agreement. This is not an anti-men agreement. You can go through the agreement that's online. It's there to protect the sanctity of the family, that the family can move on in a healthy way. No one's saying that everyone has to sign the agreement. Of course, it'd be great if people do sign the agreements, but I beg people initially, I deal with this on a daily basis, not only the marriages. How many times I meet couples before they got married? There are already issues before they got married. They may be kids at risk, or whatever, I hate the term, but whatever it is, kids that are not doing the norm, that maybe had some issues or whatever it is, second marriages, I call them higher risk marriages. If it's a higher risk marriage, it's imperative that we put some kind of protection. What's the worst case? God forbid something happens, they have a healthy place to go, and maybe the case doesn't blow up, and maybe it's not. Again, I'm not going to save every case, but if we save 50% of these cases that are difficult, 70%, 80%, that's a tremendous accomplishment. The idea of the prenuptial agreement is you don't need to serve hazmanas to bezdin. It becomes a whole challenge when the people send a hazman is basically you're asking someone to come to this particular bezdin. The way it works, you don't have to go to that bezdin. You go to a different bezdin. It becomes a whole charade and a whole game. This is basically a very strong binding arbitration agreement that binds you before the marriage to go. We had to go to an agreed upon bezdin. We had a few years ago a Tisha B'Av video. I had Charlie Harari speak, and he spoke brilliantly. He said this concept. We're asking someone to sign the agreement when their mind is there. You're happy, you got engaged, everyone's happy, you're thinking. The second is there's some kind of contention in the marriage, the mind shuts down and it becomes an emotional thing. You can't get two people to agree on anything. So let's do this when we are happy, everyone's happy. Sign the agreement, put it away, and I give a bracha, no one should ever need it. Put it away. It's a concept that we buy life insurance. Does anyone want to die? Why are we buying life insurance? Why do we buy homeowners insurance? Why do we buy auto insurance? We buy it not because we ever want to use it, but if God forbid something happens, we have protection. This is marriage insurance. It's free. Don't ever use it, but at least have some kind of protection. So again, that is a piece that I wanted to discuss, and that is the actual prenuptial agreement. There's a lot of detail to the agreement, and we could talk about it. You could look online. It explains the agreement and what's involved with the agreement. I'll be happy to talk to anyone afterwards if anyone has any questions. I want to go through the next piece, and that is what I learned from doing mediation and potentially what we as a community, as I mentioned, could do differently, that we could help our friends, our families, if someone is going through a marital conflict, how could we as a community help them that we don't blow this case up to be the next case to potentially become someone waiting for years and years to unfortunately get a get and a divorce. And like I said before, if it's done properly at the beginning, just think for a second about a fire. If I have a small fire, I take a fire extinguisher, I can put it out. If it becomes a forest fire, I can't get it out. I have to first get it to a more contained environment so I can go ahead and get my fire out. Get some fire extinguisher, firemen, and get it out. Most cases that I get, certainly from the LEV Organization, by the time they came to me, they're fighting for 4 years, 5 years, or longer. People think, and I have to say this, court system is the worst place to be. People think, and sometimes you have no choice, but they think that the court system is a fair system. I was just on the way here. I got a call from a woman. She's crying to me. She's in the system for 4 years. She can't even get a trial date. She's being tortured every single day. The cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I beg people when we do mediation, use that money better to just settle. That's not always so simple, obviously. I understand that. But people think, and I hear this in my office, if I'm not going to get this, I'm going to court. Okay, you'll be back at my desk in 3 years, 4 years, and I don't even know if I can get you out in 3-4 years. It takes the other side to agree to go out. It takes the other side to agree to mediate. That was the phone call on the way here. How do I get my husband to come to your office to mediate? That was the call. And I get this day in and day out. If we can go ahead and just give that message to people in the community, we mean well. We're sitting here, we're friends, and we're family, we hear our families going through a divorce, and they go ahead and they say, this is happening, and that's not fair, and I get this all the time. I say, people, you have to be practical. Of course, your emotions are saying she's entitled to this. I get this all the time from attorneys. They're entitled to this. I say to the attorneys, tell me, how often does a person get what they're entitled to? Do you want to sign on the dotted line and guarantee your client they're going to get what they're entitled to? And of course, the attorneys inevitably turn to me and say, I can't promise that. It depends on the judge. I said, so you're not being honest with your client. Of course you're not being honest. The more I bill you, the more I make. Just be honest with your client. Do you understand what a court fight takes? You have to be able to sit through 4 years, 5 years. A lot of the women, more than the men, but even some of the men, they don't have the emotional strength to go through a court battle. And they get worn down, and then they call me and say, just get me out of it. People mean well by telling them, go ahead and go do the fight. But there's a consequence to the fight. How many times have I heard from people, we started a court, my attorney started whatever it was, the first thing they did is they put out a restraining order against the spouse. I'm not saying there are times for restraining orders. 90% of the time I say this to a couple, all of a sudden, I don't really need the restraining order. I explain to them, there's a consequence to it. You put out a restraining order if the guy or the girl is such a problem, of course, you have no choice. Your safety, your family, your safety yourself is important. But if you realize that the consequence may be that you're going to suffer for years because of it, maybe it's not so smart to do the restraining order. And I'll give you a case that I had recently, and it just shows you how sometimes the difference of doing something up front could make the difference of saving a marriage or destroying a couple. And I have to change, obviously, some of the points, but I'm going to stick to the main idea. I got a call from somebody who's going to pick up his daughter out of town. The girl was in the hospital 3 times. Her fingers are mangled. Our initial reaction is restraining order, get this terrible, you can't ever let this girl go back. And I spoke to the father and I asked him, tell me a little about your daughter. And he tells me she really is somebody who suffers. She's not the typical girl. She has some serious issues. And I said to him, you know, you're going to pick up your child. They have 3 children. You're bringing them back to your house. Why are you doing a restraining order? The second you do that restraining order, this marriage is finished. Well, I was told if I don't do it and it goes to a divorce, then this is going to happen, that's going to happen. I said, it's nonsense. If you ever have to do a restraining order, you'll do a restraining order. Right now, your child is safe. You're taking them back to your house. And I said to him, obviously, if you tell me this is about your daughter, this is the type of girl she is, there must be something with your son-in-law. What's the story with him? And he told me what his shortcomings were. I said, just realize that the chance of your daughter, and it's a very painful thing for me to say to somebody, but I said, just realize that the decision you're making now will potentially keep your daughter to be single for the rest of her life, even if she gets a divorce. She's very limited. She has 3 children. They need a tremendous amount of support emotionally. Think twice before you do something that can maybe destroy her. But at the same time, we have to do this healthy. To make a long story short, I met the couple, and they both had their serious challenges. The husband had a serious issue as a child. Again, I have to be careful what I'm going to say. But we got them to the proper professionals. And we made sure that the woman was given her own therapist to make sure that she's protected, that no one goes ahead and puts them into a situation that's dangerous. They found out because of his issue, a specific medication would work, and it was something that he didn't even realize he was doing. She ended up getting proper therapy. Within 3 months, this couple was back together. And I'm telling you, the father of this girl was traumatized when I met him. And I understood that trauma. But with proper help, and I'm not saying this happens all the time, it's a nice story, it's a nice ending. And I got a text from them literally yesterday thanking me. The girl texted me, thanking you for saving my marriage. So there's no question about it. And my point is not that we're going to save every marriage. My point is, doing things properly, could make the difference between saving a marriage, saving a divorce, or blowing it up to be the next case. And I think that as a community, I talk about something called TMI, too much information. How many times, I remember this happened to me about 15 years ago. I was walking in the street, a friend of mine, I know this whole family, this was not a divorce, this was a family issue, a lot of money. A guy comes over to me and he starts giving me all this information about his family. I'm thinking afterwards, like, why did this guy come over to me with all this information? It's just too much information, information overload. And afterwards I scratched my head and I realized, if he really cares about his siblings, do you think he would talk like that? Do you think he'd give you all this information? Obviously, there's more to the story. And Rav David Cohen and Rav Flapish told me years ago, in his brilliant, brilliant way of thinking, he said, when people talk, it's like pointing a finger. When you point the finger, there's one finger pointing this way, there's three fingers pointing back at you. Think about that. When people talk, very often there's a lot more to the story, a lot of guilt going on. Think about that. So when someone's giving you too much information, don't feed it. We as a community have to cut it down. We can't continue to feed. You like that one? You can't continue to feed the people that like to stir the pot, because when they stir the pot, that's where the fights happen. And if we as a community could stop that, I believe that will save a lot of people. How much? Okay, so I'm going to just end with I do have a list of many reasons why there are more divorces. People ask me this all the time. Why do we have so much more divorce? There are a lot of reasons for it. Unfortunately, the world is changing. It's a changing world. I'm not making it right. I'm not making it wrong. But this is the unfortunate reality of what we're dealing with. Rabbi Zeri brought it up before. The concept of social media certainly is out there. There are a lot of mental health issues that weren't here in the past. The awareness of it, no question, the stigma of divorce is taken off. So unfortunately, we have to deal with that reality. But that doesn't mean we have to give into it. We still can go ahead and try our best as a community to try to work to maintain peace in the community, not to allow these cases to blow up. And if we do that, we're not going to save every case. But if we save 50%, 60%, 70% or more, we've done a tremendous amount. My bracha to everyone here is that by just talking about the concepts of keeping peace, maintaining peace, everyone should have peace in their homes. We should only see bracha and nachas from all of our families. Thank you for having me. Have a good night.